everybody. After my launch into doing a Facebook Live in the last couple of days, I've had the courage to put aside my fears about how I look or how I sound and to give you all a message to my friends, to anyone else who wants to listen, but to my friends. And those of you who know me know that the past almost 9 years have been very difficult for my husband and me, and I want to give you a message and to assure you that God is giving you a future and a hope, even when the worst happens. I think that what many people are fearing right now is financial disaster. You may be afraid of losing everything. And I am here to tell you that you can survive this and you can, with God's help, get through this. One of my favorite stories is about a little boy that went in to pray one night, and when he was praying, he went in to get his mom, and she said, "Well, don't you know that the angels will take care of you?" And he said, yeah. And so she read Psalm 91, which is what I read to my daughter when she was fearful, when she was a little girl, and she now reads to her children when they're fearful. And even after reading that psalm to the little boy wasn't satisfied. He was still afraid. And he said, "Yeah, Mom, angels are fine, but I want somebody with skin on." Well, I'm the person here with skin on to tell you that you can go through difficult circumstances and it can be okay. Much of this I've never shared publicly. And those of you who know me have been through it with me. Those of you who don't know me well, you can listen to my story and to see how God redeems even financial disaster. In 2011, my husband and I were wealthy. We had a 4,000 square foot house with a 4-car garage. We had 2 vehicles. We had my beloved casita travel trailer that I would take and get away to ride in. We shared our home with our daughter and our son-in-law, our beloved children. And we had a 401k. We had plenty of money in the bank. And we had the privilege through most of the last part of our marriage, or that part of our marriage, to be generous with other people. And it brought us great joy to be able to help other people. And we never dreamed that we would be in the position of the ones needing help. And I know that is something that some of you all are fearing. And I hope through this video, it's not going to be a long video, I hope through this video to give you some hope. I am here with skin on to tell you that you can do this, that you can overcome your fears because you serve a God who is more powerful than your circumstances. What happened to my husband was, for those of you who don't know, and I've got some note here so I don't wander off, on December 1st, 2011, when I'd been back about 2 weeks from a trip to the Holy Lands to research a book that I was writing about the discovery of Sodom, that I was co-writing actually. And my husband had a disease called Guillain-Barré about 20 years before. And it's a disease that attacks where the body's nerve cells attack themselves. And you end up with some degree of paralysis or impairment. My husband had it 20 years before. And so when he started showing some similar symptoms on November 30th, the one thing I assured him is, I don't think people get Guillain-Barré twice, because he'd had a fairly mild case, only hospitalized for a few weeks, and then pretty much recovered with just very few deficits. Well, he got a kind of Guillain-Barré called profoundly severe axonal Guillain-Barré, which meant that the entire sheath of all of his nerve cells was destroyed. He went into a coma and was intubated for months. And during this time, he got several other conditions, as you can imagine, in an ICU. He got C. diff. He went into septic shock. He had multiple kidney procedures because he has kidney infections, and his kidneys became blocked. And so during that first 6 weeks of being in the ICU, I lived in the ICU. I went home occasionally to take a shower, but most of the time I took a bath in the ICU. I ate in the ICU. I slept in the ICU, and I spread out the bedside tables and my computer, and with God's help wrote, and with the help of people who would come to relieve me, I'd go out into the parking lot and stick my notes into the air conditioner vents and ride in the front seat of my car. But with God's help, I was able to finish a book, a 70,000 word book, during the time that Dan was hospitalized. Well, when Dan woke up, and of course I hadn't communicated with him other than I would lean over to him and say every day, Dan, you didn't deserve this. You didn't bring this on yourself. You didn't drink and smoke, or you weren't a drunk driver. This is something that's been brought on you, and we're going to get through it, and I'm going to be right here for you. And I kept that commitment to him. Well, when he woke up, because I had we had been smart enough to take the advice of people who told us to make a will, to give financial power of attorney to each other. So when he woke up, I had sold his house, I had sold his car, I had sold my travel trailer, and the 401k started bleeding out because, as those of you who know who are paying for a loved one in assisted living or anything else, or private home care, that's not covered by insurance in most cases. And so the 401 started bleeding out. Well, when we saw that this was going to be an enormous issue, a gracious friend of ours, Sue McCall, and her husband Howard, found us a house with a motorized lift in the ceiling that would go up and down, because at that time he could not do anything for himself. He couldn't even feed himself. He had to have insulin shots every day. I mean, his care was 24/7, as you might imagine. And so we lived in that house for a year and had home health care come in, again, private pay. And any of you who private pay for home health care know that you can imagine what happens, even if you have a robust savings account, even if you think you've done everything right to preclude that. And during that time, I went back to habits of my childhood. I made do with what I had. I didn't have curtains over the kitchen sink, so I put placemats on the curtain rod. All the shampoo and toothpaste we'd brought home from the various hospitals he'd been in. Of course, he went from the ICU to a specialty care hospital while he was still intubated, and then to a rehab. So all of the personal care products, I used those. I didn't have a haircut for, I don't remember how many months. And once when I tried to cut my own hair, my dear friend Sharon Brown said, let me help you with that. So she came to the hospital. We sat outside in the employees' parking lot. And she cut my hair and waved her scissors at the homeless people who came by, saying, I'll cut yours too. So anyway, we made do. We made do. Okay. Now, during that time, I started teaching school. And I became, as I realized for the first time in my life, the breadwinner for the household. And of course, it was part-time at a classical school. I was very grateful for that. But any of you who have been caregivers can imagine that after a year of trying to provide the 20 hours a day care for Dan, and trying to teach school and to maintain my writing, I was no longer physically able to do that. And so Dan at that point went into assisted living, where he stayed for about 7.5 years. Again, private pay. And again, I'm not telling you these things for any other reason than for you to understand that we lost everything. I sold furniture out of my house. My mom and my brother bought groceries for me for a couple of years, maybe longer than that. People gave me things. People helped me. Our church stepped up in every way. I never did without a thing. I never did without one thing I needed, even though, in essence, we lost everything. And I said to a small group Bible study the other day, that may have been the best thing that ever happened to me, because I learned how to depend on the Lord. I learned that you can't save up enough. You can't prepare enough to preclude or to prevent something bad happening to you. Well, now Dan is in a nursing home because of his health. He's been there nearly a year. And I live in a low-income housing co-op. I drive an old car. And you know what? I am completely content because I'm completely taken care of. Let's see. Don't want to miss any of my notes here. You may fear losing everything. I'm here with skin on to tell you you can lose everything and it will still be all right. If you serve a God of unlimited resources and his people care for each other, you will be all right. And I also want to assure you of something. You can become the giver to someone else who's worse off. I have not escaped the responsibility of caring for people who are worse off than me. And there are people who are worse off than me. And so instead of focusing on my own, what I don't have, I can say, oh, I've got this, I can share, I can help. There are two scriptures that have been a great help to me. One of them is in James chapter 1, and he says, consider it all joy when you encounter various kinds of trouble. The word various in the Greek means many colored. That means that our trials are different, look different, each person. And within your own life, the trial of Dan's illness was not like the trial of my growing up in a violent household. It was not like the trial of going through a false religion. It was not like my own health problems. Each one is different colored, but he knows all these colors. He knows exactly how to take care of you. And he is never surprised by anything that comes on us. And, First Peter says, don't be surprised by the painful trial you're undergoing. Is there something strange happening to you? Nothing strange is happening to you that God hasn't foreseen. And the other assurance that I've had through this that has been of such help to me was that the most familiar prayer, I think, that Christians throughout the ages have prayed, and that's what we call the Lord's Prayer. And it says, give us this day our daily bread. In another place, Jesus said, don't take any thought for tomorrow. Don't worry about tomorrow, what you're going to eat or drink. He says, because your Father knows this. What that means, when you pray the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. And if you believe that what God is doing that he will answer your prayer for tomorrow, that means that what you have today is what you need. You have what you need. It may not feel like what you want. It may not feel pleasant, remember the scripture in Hebrews, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Yet later on, it yields a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. We're being trained, my brothers and sisters, we're being trained for something here. And I'm here. I'm skin on and I'm skin in, and I want to help you. Some other topics that I'd like to cover. And again, I'm not a great speaker. I'm not polished. This is not a studio. I want to talk to you a little bit more about what it means to lose everything. I want to talk to you about what it means to have catastrophic health issues of someone you love or of yourself. I want to talk to you about mental stability. How do you maintain your mental stability in a situation like this? How do you go through spiritual testing in a situation like this? How do you handle caregiving issues? Because it's not just going to be you, it's probably someone that you're going to be taking care of. Join me again if this is helpful to you, to see somebody who's been through your greatest fears of losing everything and is okay. I'm skin on and I'm skin in. Love you.